Hi, everybody. My name is Miles, and I'm a disability inclusion partner with Peak Performers. About 20 years ago, I first learned about the concept of compounding interest or compounding money, and it blew my mind. This whole concept is basically that your money will grow other money and future money and keep compounding on itself over and over and over again into the future. I had my mind blown again when I was talking with Metha Vasquez, who is my guest today, talking about the concept of compounding disability. And realistically, what we're going to be talking about today is what are some of the long term effects of disability? How can various different co occurring conditions coincide and make life a little bit more complicated and maybe uncomfortable later on down the road? And what can we do to manage it? Having said all that, Metha, I want to welcome you on. Thank you so much for joining me.
Oh, glad to be here. Thank you so much.
And everybody that happens to be joining us live, take a second to please introduce yourself in the chat. We usually get a couple people that drop by. Please take a second to introduce yourself, what you're interested in. And during the course of the presentation, feel free to drop any comments or questions that you have as well. But Metha, before we get too far into it, who are you and what are you all about?
I like to tell people I'm on my third career. So, especially those out there that are navigating, the workplace. So, my first career, I was in the restaurant industry. I have a degree in hotel restaurant management. And then I evolved into recruiting and HR leadership for the next 20 some odd years. And then about 4 years ago, I left that space, got my coaching certification, and became an executive coach and a job search strategist. So that's my professional life. In my personal life, I've been married almost 35 years, and I have three adult children, two of them which are disabled, and I'm disabled too. I'm suffer from part of the deaf and hard of hearing community. I was born deaf. I'm deaf in my right ear, and I have about 80% loss or 20% hearing in my left ear. So that's kind of me in 45 seconds.
And I appreciate you sharing that again, Meetha. By the way, if you haven't had a chance to check it out yet, I previously interviewed Meetha. She was one of my original guinea pigs on the Mind Disability story that I filmed all the way about 12 months ago. So please do check that out. She's got some amazing tips and advice if you yourself are a person that identifies as being part of the hard of hearing community. But Meetha, I want to kind of get right into the topic today and talk about the idea of compounding disability. So where does this come from for you?
Well, I kind of think of two components. You talked earlier about the exponential effect, which that's like compounding over time. And then I also think of the exacerbating effect. So hopefully over time we can talk about both. But the exacerbating effect is when one is making one worse. You called it co-occurring conditions. I love that, but it's when they're like kind of making each other worse a little bit. And so, I was born deaf, so I, had constantly, even young in my early life and then today, having to navigate in the hearing world, making, not, feeling fear, like I'm not as good as other people, having to try extra hard, having anxiety in certain situations, all of that. So that's certainly a disability. Well, their disability is a mental health challenge. So some people, actually have other challenges. So when I was growing up, I grew up in a very violent alcoholic home, where, I was always anxious and fear, living in fear, trying to figure things out. And so those two playing together can exacerbate each other. My mental health can, make it more difficult for me to hear in meetings because my brain is just going wild. And my hearing can make things more difficult in that I feel inferior, even playing more into my mental health challenges. So that's kind of an example of what I call an exacerbating effect of two disabilities working together.
Thank you for sharing that. And yeah, a lot of times these things feed together in surprising and unique ways that really we don't completely understand until years or decades later. But I remember that I first kind of had a bit of a epiphany about my own disability when I was looking at my audiogram with my audiologist, and he kind of shows it to me, and he's like, oh, like it's kind of like a ski slope. It's going down, right? Like, and I was like, oh, it's a ski slope. It goes down. And he's like, yeah, and it kind of only ever goes down. Like it doesn't ever get back up. And I'm like, ouch. But point understood. And I think it's especially like most people don't realize this, but people who have hearing loss are actually more susceptible to getting more hearing loss later on in life. So I actually have to be more careful with the hearing that I have to make sure I don't lose any more of it. That means that anytime I'm going out and mowing the lawn, I'm putting in earplugs. Anytime I go out to a large concert, I'm putting in earplugs as well too. I have to be really, really careful about the hearing that I have so that I don't exacerbate the conditions that I already experience. But whether it's a co-occurring condition or just something that gradually does degrade over time, it's part of life, right? Like it's part of living. And I think the next question I would have for you is, how can we start to better recognize the disabilities that we experience or mental health challenges, neurodiversities, et cetera? Like, how can we recognize these things a little bit earlier in our life so that we can manage them from an earlier stage?
Well, I think that's a great question. First of all, I think we're already doing better. I mean, there is no way 5 years ago I would be talking about my mental health on a podcast. Okay. So that's already improving, that we're empowered to do that a little bit. It's not as, um, you know, like a blase or not allowed to do it. So we're doing better. But another thing that we can do, and I had learned this through therapy, is that we have to recognize sometimes in our own body when something is not right. Like, so I talked earlier about having fear, anxiety, like heart racing, your palms are sweaty. I I thought these were like normal conditions that everybody lived with. You know what I'm saying? So my challenge there, and what can we do, is that understand that a lot of people deal with these things, and that part of it's normal that we all deal with it, but it's not normal to ignore it. We have to start asking questions and be curious about what's happening to see if we need treatment.
It's something that I've been spending a lot more time thinking of. People in the audience may resonate with this as well, but I have some other family members in my family that have, for a long time, ignored their health. And now I have one particular family member who is battling with diabetes and neuropathy in their legs. And I kind of want to just go back in time, like to go back in time and be like, let's talk about this. Let's like have a conversation, because I realize now that so much of it was just not acknowledging that this is a thing, and this is a thing that I'm going to be dealing with years to come from now. So it really does, like, it's a very humanizing experience. It's a kind of a scary experience to recognize and realize these things, but it's also a very important one to do. Like the earlier that you can recognize these things, the earlier you can get treatment for it. And that's not to say too that, I'm glad that you mentioned talking about mental health. I am very passionate about talking about mental health. While I myself don't consider myself to have a mental health disorder, I like to tell people that I've had a rough go of it sometimes. And it is something that it was only through talking about it that I was ever able to actually get good again, or at least get kind of functional again. Because for a long period of my life, that really kind of controlled it. And if I had not taken care of it, then I could see that very easily have turned into something that affected me on a very precipitous way for a long term as well. We did have a comment as well. Hi, Greg. Thanks for joining us. He says, hello. people, this topic hits home for me because for the past 17 or 18 years, I've had my career sabotaged because my disability of being autistic and ADHD out of fear and the other in front of me. Thank you for sharing that, Greg. And by the way, Greg, if you do want to connect with me afterwards, I'm happy to talk with you about anything that comes up in this and see if I can be a further resource for you. But yeah, and as we think about this, as Greg mentions right there, neurodiversity is something that's a bit of a hot topic right now. And many people, when they hear neurodiversity, they might be talking about autism or ADHD, as Greg does there too. But increasingly, it's started to encompass mental health as well as people with traumatic brain injuries, like any number of various different conditions that make your brain different. And it's difficult, right? Like it is difficult sometimes for us to like just acknowledge that the world was not built for our brain. And the longer that we live in this world without any kind of accommodations, the harder it becomes increasingly over time. Or do you think that people just figure out how to adapt and survive?
Well, I kind of think that's what we have done is adapt and survive. And hopefully, with people like you, that we're getting better at talking about that and empowering us to talk about it, giving us platforms to talk about it, whether it's privately, like you just offered to have a conversation with him, or it's in a forum where people can listen to others. And so it is very challenging to overcome one disability, then you add others on top of it. It becomes, to this other effect, exponentially more difficult. It's that compounding effect. So having people that you can talk to about it and seeking treatment, that it's okay to seek treatment, therapy, coaching, special types of therapy, groups, all of these things that we, are hopefully getting more platforms and access to.
I think the other thing that occurs to me is that there's really kind of two ways of looking at it. Like when you think about compounding money, right? Like there's compounding interest on the money that I have, or there's compounding debt, where debt tends to accrue more debt, like two sides of the same coin. And I think that one way that we could look at it is from a health standpoint, we could look at it from a similar lens. Like, yes, there are disabilities, there are health complications, there are things that build up over time on top of each other, adding further complications, making it harder and harder to live. But on the other side of it, we also do have situations where the good life habits that we build early and often, the good decisions that we make early on in our careers, early on in our lifetimes, those have compounding effects too, right?
Yes, they do. So I love this two sides of every coin. So that to me, that's the exponential effect of a disability, and that one can make one even worse. Okay. So me feeling less than because I can't hear in a room and is one level, but me not understanding and not being diagnosed formally with PTSD until 3 years ago was that was also coming into play in a lot of decisions and how I was interacting and making it worse. On the flip side, it gave me a superpower.
Yeah.
And the superpower is, and Miles knows to some degree because he has some hearing loss, but I can read body language and facial expressions because I was born deaf. So from the moment that I was born, I was reading this language here to help me navigate. But the other part, and this is an exponential effect, I feel I'm especially good at it because I grew up in a very violent home, unpredictable alcoholic home. So my radar and my senses were always on high alert of what was going on and how to read faces. But also, I couldn't hear well. So if there was yelling, I may not have heard it. So it's such a compounding and exacerbating effect that I meet a lot of new people, as you do, Miles, too. But I call it, I see dead people. I can get on a call with somebody and almost immediately see if there's things in their background that are getting in their way.
Hmm.
And typically that is from some type of traumatic, physical or mental disability. So, yes, it can have a positive and a negative.
So thank you for sharing all that. And I'm just curious, like, what was the feeling like for you when you first got diagnosed with PTSD? Was that a moment of revelation? Were you surprised by it, or were you relieved by it? Like, what was the feeling that went on through your head there?
I think that part of me like kind of already knew that something was wrong. There was no label for it. That's another thing that we're doing these days, not labeling in a negative way, but putting us in categories so that we can, actually get treatment. So I was like, I had been talking to my therapist for years about the side effects of me growing up in that home. And then when she told me that it was PTSD, I was like, it is? Because I think of PTSD as, war, or, somebody was in a plane crash,
Yeah.
and so I was like, really? So I think even though I was diagnosed 3 years ago, I'm still learning, like, wow, what are all of these effects and how I'm dealing with them and continuing to learn from them. It's not an overnight thing for me. It's been a process.
And speaking of learning from them, I guess, what are you most proud of some of the work that you've done previously to now, and what are you hoping to do, like from like a mental health standpoint, kind of going forward?
Yeah, so I'd say what I learned is to like listen to my body more. We talked about that earlier. So all of these, I mean, previously I had just been diagnosed with anxiety and depression.
Hmm.
Okay, but I don't feel anxious. I don't feel depressed, right? And so some of that is that heightened sense of fear and alert that is being triggered by 40, 50 years ago,
Yeah.
and learning. But that's what I've learned. I'm like, this is, my therapist says it's old crap. You know what I'm saying? And it's just coming up. And I'm like, nothing's going wrong today. Why do I feel this way? You see what I'm saying? And if that I don't want to say it was mixed diagnosed. I did have anxiety,
Yeah.
but it was it was from the PTSD. So I think I'm learning like to listen to my body more. And the what I'm continuing to practice is somatic exercises to so that I can deal with it. I think how it's also serving, and I'm learning from it as a coach, that I'm able to ask very good questions to people to make them understand, like, is there something else driving? Like, I have to have a job. I can't sit still.
Hmm.
Okay. Ding, 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 that there's something else there, right? Or I've never been unemployed and I just can't go into my savings. That's fear. And so that's what I'm learning. Since I learned that about myself, I can see it
Hmm.
now and I can help people better if they want to address it.
So when it comes to actually talking about this kind of in a workplace kind of environment, oftentimes we're expected to put our personal selves on hold when we show up to the office. And that's very much kind of like an old school way of thinking about it, of like, okay, well, just leave all that stuff behind. Like, just bring, professional Metha and stuff to the workplace. So my guest question would be, how can managers create more of a culture where people can take better care of themselves, especially for not having kind of repeating or compounding disabilities that may even affect their work later on, a year or two or five later down the road?
Yeah, to me, there's like two sides of the coin. If you're a leader, a manager, an HR, I call it just being curious.
Mm,
Like say Miles suffers from depression,
mm,
and I deal with Miles every day. And the last week, Miles just hasn't seemed like himself.
mm.
That's not saying Miles is depressed. It's just being curious, very, with a lot of curiosity. Miles, you are always so upbeat. I've noticed in the last couple days, you don't really seem like that person. What's going on? And
Mm.
so that part we can all do better
Mm,
at, like just being truly curious, about what's going on. And people will share if they want to share, but that's how we can lead with empathy, but not invasiveness. I didn't make
mm,
any judgments. I'm just saying what I see. Like, Miles, this is my normal interaction with you, and I'm not seeing that right now. Maybe I'm reading something into it, and leave that door open. On the employee side and advocating for themselves is, yeah, I'm not saying you would always feel comfortable sharing, your totality of what you have going on with any physical or mental health disability or any, challenges that you have. But you can ask for resources. That's being curious too. You can go to your leaders, your HR, and say, what kind of resources do you have for people that, have trouble concentrating at
mhm.
times? Or what kind of resources do you have, if I get tired easily occasionally? You don't have to say what you have, and then that can start the conversations. If they say nothing, then you're not really open to the discussion. Or if they say, well, tell me more, then you can get the dialogue going.
I think it's important to call out too that many employers have employee assistance programs, and there are going to be various different degrees of helpful. But I think it's important to explore all of those resources that you can that are available. And I think the second thing that I would call out too is that as an employee, keep in mind that an accommodations request is looking out for your future self too. So, for example, you have a ergonomic setup for your desk, right? This it might be something that you can kind of grin and bear it throughout the course of the day. Maybe you're a little bit uncomfortable, but you need to think about the compounding effects of working in an environment that is not ideal for your body. And keep in mind too that a lot of times these things, one, if you come to your employer with a specific request and you also come to them being able to positively frame it. This is going to be something that makes me more productive. It's going to make me be something that makes me feel better throughout the course of the day, more comfortable. I'll be better able to focus, especially things like ergonomic kinds of desk or chairs or keyboards. These are oftentimes not big expenses for companies as well. And on the flip side of that, too, I think that it's important that as employers, we make sure that that everybody knows all the resources that are out there and available for them, because you just don't realize how many people are masking, right? Like you just don't quite get it that there's so many people that are around you that are managing mental health disorders that you would just never know just by looking at them. So it's important to make all resources available for all people, right?
Yes, yes. And I might have, I don't know if I told you this story before, Miles, but I have told this story on a podcast before. But, I'm completely deaf in my right ear. And so all my life in the hearing world, like in school and in workplaces, I've always sat places where what I call my good ear was so where I could see. Well, I took this job, and I was in HR, so people stopped by my office all the time,
Mhm.
and my desk faced in a way in my office where my bad ear was to the door,
Mm.
and I was constantly getting startled. And this is also an exacerbating fact. We talk about the overlap. I have an extreme startle reflex because of growing up in a violent household, but also because I'm deaf. So it looks ridiculously, because it's so grandiose when I'm startled. You see what I'm saying? Because it is so overwhelming to me. So this, when I talk about curiosity for managers, so I hadn't realized how bad my startle reflex was in this work environment. And one day, my boss came around the corner. He was right next door. He came around the corner, and I must have jumped out of my seat.
Yeah.
Okay. And the interesting thing was, I was working for a company that made it was supported the deaf and hard of hearing through the telephonic system and through software. And he's like, Metha, um, would you like a lighted doorbell? And I was like, I was at the time, I was like 50. I'm like, I don't know. That sounds like pretty good. He said, because I'm staring at the PC and people are in the back. He
Mm,
says, well, put it right there above your PC.
mhm.
And that way because I have people stopping by all the time. And I'm like, oh my God. And his curiosity just, and you're right. I don't know how much that thing is. It's probably like $10. You know what I'm saying? Like they came in, they put it right above my PC, and they took care of it. So you don't always have to be the one that asks, but my boss was curious, and I was even dumbfounded. I don't know. Do I need one?
I think the other thing that I would be on the lookout for, kind of going down the vein of curiosity, is that um, again, the earlier that you can recognize disabilities, the earlier that you can recognize neurodiversities that you have, the earlier you have access to resources. And I think that one of the things that makes me excited about social media in this day and age is that there are so many sub communities that are out there. There's oftentimes this chorus of people that say, well, it seems like everybody has ADHD these days. And no, what it is that we are getting better at recognizing it within the community. There's not any kind of seismic shift within the population. It's just that we're better at recognizing it. And I think that one of the things that excites me about social media is that there are more communities than ever of people who have experienced similar conditions who you can connect with, and you don't have to feel so darn alone. You can find other people who have had similar kind of situations, experiences, and circumstances, and be able to figure out what it is that you need to kind of get better right now. As we start to kind of wrap up, I wanted to ask about self care because I think that it is so important for, again, having the right side of the coin, right? The positive side of health and positive side of long-term management of these conditions. So, on a day-to-day basis, what does self-care look like for you, and what have you done today?
That's great. You put me on the spot. What have I done today? Okay. Well, first of all, I think today, in fact, there's kind of two things. For me, I'm a verbal processor. So I've had therapy throughout my life. I have a therapist now. And I use that person as much or as little as I need. Okay. And so therapy kind of takes care of the past, like what is, addressing the past. I also have a coach, and I've had a coach off and on for the last 15 years. A coach takes care of the future, like, okay, what are my goals, what am I working on now? My past comes in there sometimes, and I have to deal with it, so that helps a lot. And I encourage people, and I have clients that are having therapy and coaching. It just depends on your goals. I also believe in support groups. If that's helpful, you talked about social media. For some people, that is very beneficial. And what I've done for myself today is I have learned that certain activities help me. One of them is walking, okay? Because I can't I try to leave my phone, but you can't look on your phone. You can't, you have to be in the moment. And I've been doing it for about 35 years, and it really helps sometimes when I'm feeling anxious to just, it doesn't have to be hard exercise, but walking and doing that. And I have been doing a lot more somatic exercises, which are like really talking out loud and affirming that you're doing the right things.
I do a similar kind of thing. I force myself, or at least I try to force myself every day at 10 o'clock and 3 o'clock every day to go for a walk. That's at least 15 minutes. And if I can't make it for 15 minutes, maybe I can just stand up from my seat and walk around the office a little bit too. But again, like I'm thinking about the compounding effects, how these things will resonate throughout the course of my entire life, and I hope that it helps. Right, like I hope that these kinds of things will help to make a happier and feeling a Miles that feels a little bit better. So, Metha, thanks for coming on today. Real quick, how can people get connected with you, and what kind of stuff are you working on these days?
Okay, well, I joke that there's only one Metha. So you can go into LinkedIn and put my first name, Metha. That's also my website, Metha Peak, Peak, like peakperformers.com. But I'm a lot on LinkedIn because I do address the working community, whether it's through disability or employment. So I'm out there. And what I'm working on these days is I'm working a lot. It's a very competitive job market right now. I know Miles knows that too. So I'm really working with my clients to raise their visibility, to get job interviews, and get better jobs in this community right now.
I love that. I love that. Well, thanks so much for coming on, Metha. Thanks everybody that happened to join us live, and we'll see you next time. Again, this has been Miles from Peak